Welcome back to The Road Chose Me. On today's episode, something a little bit different. The 2021 Bronco is the new hotness right now, and I've received hundreds of messages asking if I think it'll be any good for overlanding. So let's dig right into some of the considerations that the bigger media outlets haven't thought about, and from my perspective as a long-term international overlander, do I think it'll be a good platform or not? A little bit of background for anyone who's new to the channel. I drove from Alaska to Argentina, 40,000 miles through 16 countries, and I drove all the way around Africa, 35 countries, 54,000 miles. So all told, I've done over 100,000 miles through 55 countries around the world, spanning 5 years. So to say that I know a thing or two about overlanding, I guess that's true. And because of that, the requirements that I look for in a vehicle are obviously a lot different than someone who's just going out on the weekends. So when I say overlanding, this is the kind of stuff that I mean, really long-term expeditions. And so I'm going to look at the vehicle from a different perspective than most people. So first of all, yeah, the 2021 Bronco, it looks good. There's a 2-door and a 4-door version. It's body-on-frame construction, solid rear axle, lots of off-road goodies like lockers and big tires. I mean, let's just get it right out of the way. This is clearly a Wrangler competitor. They're absolutely positioning this to try and steal sales from the 2-door and the 4-door Wrangler. And in that regard, yeah, I think it's pretty good. I think it's going to be a hit. And, you know, the Wrangler has been the darling of the SEMA show now for about 10 years, by far and away the most modified vehicle in North America. And I think the Bronco has a real chance of taking that crown. I think it's pretty clear that in the coming years, aftermarket support is going to boom. Every company who currently makes something for the Wrangler, I think there's a really good chance they're going to start making things for the Bronco. So I think it will be a viable option. But let's dig into some of the more nitty-gritty and what's actually important to overlanders. So on Ford's website, they've got preliminary specs for the 2021 Bronco. That's what I'm going to base a lot of this off of. And obviously none of this is locked in concrete yet, but this is what they're saying so far the vehicle's going to be capable of. And the first thing I'm going to take a look at, the most important consideration, is payload. How much weight can we actually put in this thing? And for the 2-door here, they've listed 1,170 pounds, the 4-door 1,370. So no doubt about it, this is right in line with the JL Wrangler. It's not huge, it's not terrible, but kind of suffers the same problem as the Wrangler does. If you put 4 adults and a little bit of camping gear in there, you've already hit the payload of the vehicle. Never mind if you add steel bumpers or a winch or anything on a roof rack. At that point, you're going to be well over the weight rating of the vehicle. So I would say from a payload perspective, they clearly haven't designed the Bronco to be a serious overlander. I mean, we only need to look at the 70 series Land Cruiser or even the new Land Rover Defender. Both of them have almost 2,000 pounds of payload. So right away, that's 600 or 700 pounds more than this new Bronco. So for people looking for a serious long-term expedition, unfortunately, the payload of the Bronco is lacking right from the beginning. The next thing I'm going to have a look at is fuel and fuel range. And so far they haven't published anything about fuel tank size, although based on the photos I've seen, it appears they just have one tank on one side. We can assume it's probably in the 60 to 80 litre range, which is somewhere around 20 gallons. And so chances are it's going to have mileage and range that are really similar to the Wrangler right now. So again, nothing really for long-term expeditions. They certainly haven't announced anything about an additional fuel tank, you know, like the 70 series Land Cruiser can come with from the factory. So far, they've only announced 2 gas versions. There will be no diesel in North America, which is a shame because if you were staying in North America, no doubt a diesel would get better mileage. And so in that regard, I think the diesel Wrangler has a bit of an advantage. If you're staying in North America and you're going on a long trip up to Alaska or, you know, cross country, the diesel's gonna get better mileage. So you're gonna spend less money and you're gonna be able to go more remote without having to fill up so often. When it comes to the 2 engine choices in the Bronco, everyone else is gonna talk about horsepower and torque and gear ratios. And I'm just gonna say, I don't even care about that stuff. It's a 2021 vehicle. Clearly it has to have enough horsepower and torque to actually get out of its own way. So those are just marketing figures that I don't think really play into whether or not they're a good choice for a long expedition. I'm going to look more at the details. Both of these engines are turbocharged, which definitely has disadvantages. Firstly, the torque curve is going to be a lot different. And when you put your foot down and you're low in the rev range, you're not going to have the same amount of torque as a vehicle that isn't turboed, because you're going to have that turbo lag. So for off-roading, I can't imagine it's going to be quite as good as the Wrangler with its much bigger engine. That being said, the 2.7 litre engine in the Bronco, it has been in the F-150 for a while now, and people seem to like it, so that's a good thing. Certainly the turbos add a lot of complexity with all of their oil lines, and no doubt about it, when you turbocharge an engine, you add heat. And heat under the hood is something to be avoided at all costs. So I don't particularly love the idea of driving across the Congo with a turbocharged gasoline engine. It's not ideal, but again, it seems to have a pretty good reliability record in the F-150, so I'll give them the benefit of the doubt on that one. The more important thing is the fuel that these engines actually require, and so far it seems that they're both going to run on 87 octane without a problem. So you don't have to buy premium gas, which is a really good thing, because when you're in remote Bolivia or you're in the Congo, you're not going to find premium gas. So it's really important that your engine isn't tuned so highly that it has to have premium. And the way they've done this is probably because both engines are direct injection and they're variable valve timing. So probably what happens is if the computer detects pinging, it's going to scale back all of the timing and it's going to inject the fuel at the last possible moment to avoid detonation, and so it can tolerate that lower quality fuel. So that is a good thing. I'm happy to see that these will run on low quality fuel. Next up, we definitely need to talk about that independent front suspension and whether or not that's a deal breaker for a long expedition. You know, the Hilux and other vehicles around the world, the D-Max, they've had independent front suspension for a while now. And from what I've seen online, it is a weak point. People do break the CV joints, they do break the short drive shafts, and it's just something you have to consider. There's no doubt about it, when you look at the vehicles people drive around the world, the 70 series Land Cruiser, the Mercedes G-Wagon, the Land Cruiser Defender, even something like an Iveco Daily or a Unimog, they all have solid front axles. And I think they all have solid front axles for a reason, and it's because they're simple and they're strong. And that's what you need when you're going around the world. You don't want complicated, high-tech stuff that's a little bit finicky or it's difficult to repair. You just want strong and durable. So for me personally, I still love a solid front axle vehicle for the kind of trips I do. And I guess time will tell whether that IFS on the Bronco is a weak point and people do have trouble with it. Certainly it's going to make lifting the vehicle and fitting larger tires more complicated. You're going to have to replace more parts of the suspension than if you just had a solid front axle. So on that point, I'm going to say a bit of a negative for the Bronco compared to the Wrangler and other solid front axle vehicles. One thing that I think is great about the Bronco is the removable roof. And so no doubt about it, this opens up pop-up options like the one that I have on my Wrangler. So it's an integrated pop-up roof where you can actually stand up and walk around in the vehicle. And the Bronco's great because it doesn't have a crossbar at the B pillar. I don't have any official word yet, but I have it on pretty good authority that there are going to be at least one company building a pop-up for the Bronco. And so that's really exciting because that, in my opinion, makes it much more viable for a long expedition than just a roof rack and sticking a rooftop tent on a roof rack. On that talk of roof rack, I think it's really great that in the preliminary specs, Ford are already listing the payload for any potential roof rack. And so they say that it has a static load of 450 pounds and a dynamic load of 110 pounds. And I think that's really great because it shows that they already know people are interested in putting a roof rack on this thing and that they've already rated it to a certain degree. Something else that I really think is great about the Bronco is the way that they allow you to add any of the off-road goodies to any of the packages that you want. So even if you buy the base model, you can still choose to get lockers and 35-inch tires. I think that's really great. It's something that Jeep have never done. You kind of have to buy the Rubicon or you just can't have some of those goodies. And so in that regard, I hope that it will push Jeep to offer more of those kinds of mix and match options. maybe then you could buy a Sport but still have lockers on the Sport. I think that'd be a really good thing. And there's no doubt about it, on paper, the Ford engineers clearly looked at the Rubicon Wrangler and then tried to beat all of its numbers, its approach angle, its breakover angle, and its departure angle. And on paper, the Bronco does win, and I think that's impressive, but most of it probably just comes down to the 35-inch tires. If Jeep were to offer that tire from the factory, I'm sure it would equal or best those numbers. But in reality, again, those are just marketing numbers, and they're much more about rock crawling or serious off-roading than they are about long-term overlanding. So while they're a cool gimmick, I don't really think they actually factor into whether this is a good choice or not. So overall, what do I think of the Bronco for long-term expeditions? It looks pretty good. I think it's going to be a serious competitor to the Wrangler, which is a really good thing because more competition is going to drive all of the manufacturers to make better vehicles, to give us more buying choices, and hopefully to drive the prices down. So that's a win for us as consumers. That being said, I think it's a little bit of a shame that the Bronco has such a low payload. I'd love to see them offer another package, maybe that's the, utility type version that has a much higher payload. And it would be really cool if they offered something like a secondary gas tank. That would show they're serious about supporting people who are looking to do a longer expedition. And then finally, the independent front suspension. I think it is a bit of a weak point. I think it's a negative for the Bronco, and we're just gonna have to wait and see what the outcome of that is. I'm sure you can make the new Bronco work even with its compromises. So overall, I think it's a really exciting vehicle. I think it's great that Ford have stepped up and they've clearly laid down the gauntlet to Jeep. And it's going to be really interesting to see what Jeep do, how they respond to that challenge. It seems pretty likely they're going to bring out the V8 JL. Hopefully it'll come to the Gladiator as well. It seems like the Gladiator's just about to get the diesel here in North America, which is fantastic. So exciting times ahead in the next few years. We're going to have so many more vehicle choices, and this is great. More choices, more competition, fingers crossed for lower prices. So let me know in the comments, what do you guys think of the new Bronco? What do you think is a great vehicle platform to build off of in 2020 or 2021? And let me know if you've enjoyed this video, hearing my opinions. Tons of people want to know what I think is a good vehicle. So I can do more videos like this if you like. I can discuss why I've chosen the ones I have and what I'll be choosing in the future. So yeah, leave a comment below, let me know, hit that subscribe button, don't miss out on future videos, and I'll see you next time right here on The Road Chose Me.